Welcome to another Essential Quinn video today. Today my subject is analysis of excess deaths by specific diseases. This is for England only, and it is information that has been recently provided by a new government department called the Office for Health Improvement and Disparities. Now if you remember, I did a video last week detailing excess deaths with particular focus on age group. And what I plan to do is amalgamate these two data sets and see if we can explain the excess deaths better by looking at specific disease categories. As you'll know, there is a lot of talk in the media about excess deaths at the moment. Certainly the online media, if not the mainstream media. Here is a table detailing my previous analysis showing the excess deaths in 2022. This is for the whole of England and Wales rather than just specifically England. Now there are great concerns at the moment that continuing into 2023 we are seeing excess deaths among all age groups, and this is quite concerning. On screen now are the 14 different main disease categories by which someone will be classified, sadly, when they pass away. The report from the new government department gives information by these disease categories. And here's a first look at this new data. The data is provided in this dynamic modeling report. It is essentially a business information tool used in a health setting. We can see here that if we select a particular disease category, in this case cardiovascular disease, we will get the excess number of deaths for each week during the year. And we can see here in the early parts of 2022 we were seeing lower excess deaths across most disease categories, but that changed specifically after the end of April roughly, and from then on we saw quite substantial deaths across the year. Now to explain this chart below, this is a bar chart and we have 4 different categories of information in this chart. The bars themselves represent those who've been classed as having died from that disease. With the dark grey bar, that means those who died from that specific disease. That was their primary reason for death. However, in death classification, it's not uncommon for people to be given multiple causes and multiple categories. And here we see in the grey bars those people who didn't die from that specific disease, but it was recorded on their death certificate. And the yellow bars are the COVID deaths, those who died from that specific disease, but they also had tested positive at the time of their death. And the purple line is the 5-year average for this disease category. So this is the first time that we are actually getting this type of data to be able to analyze and benchmark against, which will be very, very useful. Now we have jumped to my own Excel spreadsheet report. As before, we've got the 5-year average in this column and the actual deaths in this column and the change in percentage. And now we have the different diseases, the 14 different major classifications. And we can see here that we have the excess numbers and the percentage change, something the graph is not able to give us for the year in total. Now, one thing to note is that you will see here the total at the bottom for all of these disease categories add up to more than the total deaths in the year. Now that is not an error. The reason for that is that, as I said before, people get classified into multiple disease categories on their death certificate, a primary cause, and there might be multiple secondary causes. So that is why the two data sets don't add up. But nevertheless, because we have the 5-year benchmark data next to it, we're able to see the directional change in that disease category. And what we can see here very clearly, that whereas overall we have 8.6% increase on the year, we're seeing substantial increases across many disease categories as well. Cardiovascular, for example, has increased by 8.7%, ischemic heart disease by 11.3%, heart failure by 14.8%, and liver disease by 13.5%. Diabetes is another significant one, up by 12.3%. Now, it would also be interesting to look at this data, but by the specific cause of death. And here in this table, I have this data summed for the year. So in column I here, we have some 566,000 people for England only who are classified by these 14 different disease categories. Going back to the BI tool, this would be people assigned in the dark grey bars in this chart. And what is good about this data is that it ties in with the overall death numbers given by the Office of National Statistics, some 576,000 people. So we have a balancing figure of 10,000 for other diseases or for the population of Wales, which are not included in these specific disease categories. So I think we have good, reliable data here. Now you'll also see that we have a 5-year average. Now I have derived this 5-year average based on the data set below. I've had to use modeling assumptions to derive this 5-year benchmark data by disease, but I'm ensured it reconciles back to the overall total. And so whilst we can't be certain that it is 100% accurate, it should be able to give us good directional change numbers. So in the case of cardiovascular disease, we see that by specific disease category, the increase is some 16%, ischemic heart disease 19%, heart failure 22%. An interesting fact is that cancer has hardly changed at all over the 5-year average. This is very positive, given that there were concerns that due to the shutdown of the NHS for 2 years, more people would actually die from cancer, and this is clearly not the case for the 2022 year at least. The other important fact to note is the first 5 disease categories in this list are primarily to do with heart function or blood function, and we see substantial increases in all of these disease categories. Now, it is interesting to note that some of the side effects of recent medical procedures related to heart and blood disorders, and we are certainly seeing huge increases in those categories. So that does beg the question that questions have to be asked and answers given at government ministerial level to explain why we are seeing substantial levels of increases across these disease categories, particularly in a year which followed 2 years of excess death levels, particularly among the aged. And we would expect death levels to be actually running lower than 5-year norms at this point. Another important point to note about this data is that within the classifications of diseases, there is no classification for COVID. Rather, if someone died specifically from COVID, they are more than likely to be classified under acute respiratory infections, which includes things like influenza. And we see here that in the whole year, we only have an increase of some 2,014 people classed in that category. So that is much, much lower than the 33,000 odd who are classed as having died with COVID. Now we have a summary of the highlights and major facts that I think this analysis brings out today. I'll leave it up for you for a few seconds. If you want to read it in detail, please pause the video. We live in uncertain times, and it is sad to see so many increased deaths, particularly among younger people. But let me leave you with some words of hope.